Right. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you guys had a fantastic last week, and I hope that you had a good weekend. So let's start our Monday, or, finish our Monday, depending on where you're at, with a little news. As always, this is brought to you by myself. No one's asked me or paid me to bring this to you. And my opinions are those of my own. They don't represent anybody that I've worked for in the past, present, or future. Let me raise my desk up just a little bit. All right, yeah. So this last weekend, I was out for my brother's wedding, doing his photography. And so I was just a little bit busy. But I think I got some pretty interesting topics to talk to you guys about today. First, I want to tell you to go out and support your favorite YouTuber. I'm not necessarily telling you to support me, but go out there, buy something from Raw Code or somebody like that. I'm wearing Raw Code, one of my favorite YouTubers. But you don't have to buy something. You can just go and contribute into their Discords or just their communities. Be a part of them. That helps a lot as well. So go out and support somebody that's doing some pretty fantastic stuff. Just show them their support. Go comment on one of their videos. I actually always love it when somebody comments on my videos. So maybe somebody will comment on this one. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about my brother's wedding was pretty good. As far as it goes, it was pretty good. It actually went better than I thought it was going to. Yep. She didn't leave, which was good. He's my brother. I'm always surprised when one of us counts gets married, and there's no screaming involved. So no, it went well. And I'm always nervous when I'm the photographer. I'm not a professional photographer. I do a lot of photography, and I've ended up doing a lot of photography for a lot of people. But and so I guess I'm kind of like semi-pro at this point. But I'm always a little nervous when I'm doing it. So I'm glad it's done. I got some pretty good photos that I'm pretty happy with. And so yeah, I'm happy. No complaints. Except I think I left my little light. As you can see, background. I think I left my little light that I use to light up there, nice and blue. So, my whole set is not nearly as good as it was. That's the sad part. I'll have to try to get that back. All right, so talking about this stream. This stream is getting a little bit longer. We're going to be cutting it up. We're just playing around with it as right now. I think that the place where you can get the little bites of information that we're going to be clipping them to and cutting up this so that you guys can have, a little bit more longevity, as well as I'm recording it at a little bit higher resolution, so when I upload it, hopefully the text and everything is a little easier to read, as well as just breaking it out a little bit. I think we're going to go with null bytes. Now there is a null byte YouTube video or YouTube channel, and I was really bummed when somebody in the community brought that up, that it existed, because I didn't know that it existed. Now they haven't posted for about a year, and really I didn't even know they existed. So I think I'm going to go with the name anyways, even though it's really close to theirs, because it wasn't about copying them. It's just keeping true. I really like null. I need to make a video on why I like null so much. And it's not because I like dealing with the problems, but it's about how we've learned and grown as software engineers and a community. It's why Rust exists. It's why C++11 did everything that it did and has grown as it has with their unique pointers and things like that. So yeah, it's more about like being the epitome of software engineer and why I like it. Anyway, so I think I'm going to go with that. And I will probably make a Twitter post about it later this week. And then hopefully you'll start to see the clips in them. And I'm going to try to do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, having at least one clip in each one of those. So we might do a category. We'll see exactly how that works out. I'm going to be experimenting with it. You let me know what you like best in a comment or in Discord, however you like to do it. Let's jump into the news. We have some particularly juicy stuff in the security. Let's talk about Specter and Meltdown. Now, if you guys don't remember what Specter and Meltdown were or are, it's basically this speculative execution of code. And it's how processors tried to get faster, where they try to guess what you want, process it before you ask for it. That's what they're doing. And there were some problems with this. So this is one way that they've sped up processors. It's kind of a fake way of speeding up, but they're pretty good at it. And what turns out is you could actually kind of trick the processor into giving you data that it shouldn't have. That's what very simplification of Specter and Meltdown. Now, there are a couple problems with the fixes. The fixes basically take away processing power. Somebody new to the game has been hit with their own Specter and Meltdown. But this one's actually worse because it actually has a specific caveat. In Specter and Meltdown, you could actually only get access to data that was actively being processed on the processor. You couldn't actually access RAM or disk or anything like that. The new contender for the largest catastrophe in security doesn't have that because they actually they've optimized everything, every security bucket out of the way to give you the most speed that they could with an ARM processor. And a lot of people think that they did just a really good job on ARM, but what they don't realize is a lot of this was that they put everything right beside each other, and they took down all these barriers that are generally there to protect the blast radius of something like this. So we are talking none other than our favorite bad apple. Our apple. It's being, I don't know how to pronounce this. Angry. I don't know. Anyways, this is a data memory dependent prefetcher. And basically, not only could they optimize or pre-process stuff on the processor for you, but they could actually prefetch the data for you. That's one of the things that they're doing on the M1 chips, is prefetching the data. And so what makes this worse is that you can actually trick the processor into prefetching data for you that the user didn't ask for. Now, I don't think that this is as big of a deal because these things aren't used in data centers, or hopefully you're not using these things in data centers. Mac OS was never built to be used in a data center. And if you're not, I don't think that this affects home users as badly. It's still bad. Don't get me wrong. If I was an executive or had access to privileged information, I wouldn't want that information on an M1 Mac because as of right now, Apple hasn't said about how they'll fix it. And the problem with a fix of this type is most likely you're going to slow the whole architecture down. And that's probably not going to be great for Apple. That's the fix that happened with Specter and Meltdown. That's been the fix every single time. There's no other way to do it except by slowing everything down because to fix it, you're basically defeaturing the OS or the chips. A lot of times you can't actually fix it in the firmware of the chip. Sometimes you can. Even when you can, though, usually that slows it down. But when you can't do it, like we did when I was working at SUSE, we actually fixed it in our kernel in software. So basically, we had fixes in the kernel to mitigate it, even if your OS or your hardware was vulnerable. And this actually allowed us to fix it much faster than a firmware patch or anything like that, as those are much slower and longer to get out. But it also slowed you down a lot more than the real fix. So I'll keep you updated if I find anything, but so far I haven't found that Apple has actually really even commented or even addressed that the issue exists. Yeah, good times. Another piece of security information that I saw was this. Google Cloud apparently has a security issue even firewalls can't stop. Now, this is clickbait. This is clickbait. I was excited. It's nothing new. Basically, it says that you can misconfigure your crap. And you know what? Honestly, the misconfiguration they're talking about should be prevented by GCP. There's no reason for GCP to have this type of misconfiguration in there. There's no useful way of having it. And so they should fix it. But again, it's still misconfiguration. So honestly, misconfiguration. Actually, Chaos DB, if you remember that, was actually misconfiguration, but on Microsoft's side. Microsoft misconfigured it. This is like half misconfiguration on GCP side, but misconfiguration all the same. Let's talk about India. Now, I don't talk politics much. Sometimes my politics bleed through just because that's who I am. And yeah, you'll get an idea of what my politics are. But let's talk about how 1984 is a terrifying place and a terrifying book to live in. I did not know how far India had gone off the China rails. Like, I believe a lot from China. China does a ton of stuff, doesn't treat their citizens very well, and mistrusts them at every step that they can. I didn't realize India had gone down the exact same path. It was a little startling to me, and I'm going to cover some more. I might have a whole section on the stupid stuff our government has done. I actually have a news article in here of something stupid the U.S. is doing. Just to balance out my my India coverage. I'm making sure that I have that. I don't know where that tab is. I do have a thing on the US. Well, basically it was around VPNs. We'll find it later. Basically, there's 3 sites that VPNs are ordered now not to talk with, or not to to block that traffic. Anyways, but India. We're talking about India today. I'll probably follow up with India a little bit later, but India has now, as far as I can tell, again, this, especially on foreign countries like this, as you'll find in my follow-up to the Spanish stuff, this is what I can find in English. I'm not Indian, I don't speak Hindi, and this is a lot of just people reporting on stuff and me accepting it at face value. India orders VPN companies to collect and hand over user data. So this basically means that VPNs are useless in India, or if you're using an Indian VPN. So if you're in India and want to use a VPN, don't use an Indian VPN. Because basically what this is doing is making your data only as secure as the VPN. And let me put it out this way. It's not even that I'm mistrusting the Indian government. Let me pretend that I just trusted the Indian government as best as I can. Well, now your data is being stored in yet another place, your ISP, your VPN, and it's only as secure as the least secure place that it's being stored. And so now it gives hackers a great place to do it. And if the Indian government is also keeping these logs and ingesting all of this, it's yet another place. And we'll see later on that maybe the Indian government isn't so good at cybersecurity stuff. Maybe they're better than I'm giving them credit for. But so this requires everybody to know your data. So privacy is not something that you have. This is like wiretapping. Effectively, this is wiretapping in the modern era. I'm very against it. I'm very pro privacy. And I think there was a reason why, places like in the US, we have laws against you're not allowed to be searched unless if there's reason, or you have a warrant, or things like that. So anyways, I found this very, very interesting. And it goes worse. India has been collecting eye scans and fingerprint records of every citizen. Really? I only started looking into this here because somebody posted a tweet of this to me to show how they collect iris data from everyone. And everyone is a potential criminal until verified. This is actually pretty scary. This is pretty scary. We live in 1984. This is just going on more. Let's talk about there's a lot of stuff, and we're going to break it down in future videos. I'm not going to cover too much because I just don't have the time or the effort to do it. But even how you synchronize your time clocks in data centers are now being restricted to using India's own jurisdiction, as well as their logs that you use to maintain these systems have to be kept for a while. It's getting a little ridiculous. There was a lot of information. I actually want to do a huge shout out to I'm gonna say that your name is Fresbo. I appreciate you for alerting me to this. I hadn't actually kept up much with India's different things, but this is very authoritarian. Yeah, I see India being the Chinese, like they're gonna catch up to China here soon. Like they're not quite there yet, but they're gonna be there here soon. Like I won't even be surprised if my YouTube channel gets banned in India for what I've just said. They've already banned like 22 YouTube channels. But yeah, all of your server logs now belong to the Indian government. And yeah, I did not realize India had gone this far down the authoritarian Chinese rabbit hole. It was kind of staggering. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this. I again, not a political. This is from a. There's a lot of implications to this. Like if you're running a data center in India, which cloud providers can and do, I think it affects how you keep time in your data centers. It affects the security of your data centers. And if you have a control plane that goes across this, it affects the security of all of your data centers. Now, you should isolate them as best as you can, but there's only so much that you can do. And so I see that this could be very... Anyways, it's very difficult for people to handle and very difficult for it's very expensive for companies to handle. There's a lot of expense that goes into supporting places like China. You'll hear me make a fuss about like EU servers because they're a little bit more painful to support. But this is a whole nother level of authoritarian. So So, yeah, anyways, very, very, I would say interesting. Maybe not interesting is the best word, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to try to understand it a little bit better. I went through some of their regulations that they put out, was trying to understand it to bring it to you guys a little bit better. Basically, they're regulating everything and are very much every piece of data that exists belongs to the Indian government. So, yep. Let's move on to a little bit more friendly security, and a little bit more heartwarming, just your normal remote code execution vulnerability. F5 was hit by 17 high-rated, 1 critical, and 24 medium. 1 was rated low. I don't even count low-rated ones. But of the top one that was released was a 9.8 and is the remote code execution vulnerability. So if you're running F5, you should be patching. They have released patches for all of these. So there are patches out there. they assured that this was only on the control plane and not the data plane of the F5. But it strikes me generally that if you take control of the control plane and you have a remote code execution on the control plane, it's not a far jump to assume that your data plane could be vulnerable. There you could change and affect the control plane because you can change the configuration in the control plane to make your data plane vulnerable. So, yep, definitely something to be cognizant of. I'm not saying that that happened or could happen. I just know that you basically could execute whatever code you wanted on the control plane. So I don't think that it's a far jump. All right. On top of that, we have an unpatched DNS related vulnerability affects a wide range of IoT devices. So this is basically your classic IoT bug. Not a big deal there. This is interesting. I wanted to talk about it because basically this is LastPass going away if this actually rolls out in a functional way. I have been calling for this for a long time. Everyone knows what a password is. A password validates or tries to say that you know that it's me because I know this special secret. Now in India, you just have to use your iris and you know that you're you. But here in the United States and in other free places, we don't have that luxury. We have to come up with some sort of way to prove that it's you. And Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and all of them are trying to drop passwords. Passwords are very insecure in most part because a lot of people don't use Bitwarden or LastPass. I personally love Bitwarden. And a lot of people don't use those. And so they make passwords that they can remember. And they don't use battery horse staple, or they do use that one specifically, and that one's not very secure anymore. And so a lot of people are trying to get rid of passwords. And that's what Apple, Google, Microsoft plan to do using this device. They say that you can log into this, and Google has been doing this for a little while. I noticed with, so I running Android currently. I'm trying to switch to just bare Linux. We'll see how that goes in the future. But I've been able to unlock stuff with and do two-factor authentication with Google. And so this basically will allow you to unlock web pages and stuff that are linked with your Microsoft or Google or Apple account using your phone, which would be pretty cool. I think that this is pretty awesome. Yes, and all rubber cable, they all have their issues. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think any of their issues are nearly as large as user-made passwords. Generally, they're not. Generally, they're not strongly. They're not well conceived. That's what I'm going to say. I watched a hacker talk on basically guessing your password off of your public Facebook posts. And this was a while ago, and it was pretty eye-opening to me. Where it was like, yeah, I can just learn enough about you, and he had an algorithm to do it to then come up and guess your password. So, yeah, there's also security keys. I think mine are actually in my backpack because I was traveling. I have security keys, so there's different ways to do this with like hardware and other things like that. I actually really like that hardware piece. If you do that though, you have to have two of them. One second, here we go. So this is a YubiKey key. Yubi is one of them, but you have to have two. And the reason is if you lose one, you don't want to be screwed. So you you always want to have a backup because yeah, you don't want to have to recover those. So yeah. Anyways, this is really cool just because I do believe that passwords are a big problem. It's not fun to have to memorize a bunch of them. And even using a tool like LastPass or Bitwarden can be challenging. You have to have it installed on everything. And if you don't have it installed, or you're like, because you're logging into a TV, you have a 14-character password with 12 with like 6 different symbols that you're trying to type on with a TV remote, and things like that that are painful, just painful. Yep. All right, so another bit of justice given by technology. Russians took $5 million worth of farm vehicles from Ukraine to find that they were remotely disabled. This, generally, I don't like the ability to do this, to remotely disable stuff that, like, I have bought. This, on the other hand, it turned out to be good. So Russian troops have been plundering the countryside. It's not just a war of occupation. It is literally a war of theft, from what I can see. And it turns out that when you steal $5 million worth of farm equipment, you're going to have to know how to get through around the security, because they can remotely disable it. This was fantastic. Just wanted to bring it up because I found it awesome. So let's jump into our cloud news. I'm going to start our cloud news by talking about hiring and how good talent is hard to find. And if you have good talent, how maybe you should try to keep it. So let's talk about the exodus from GCP. As far as I can see, Google has been bleeding GCP specifically has been bleeding executives for a while. I think 14 in the last year. So here is a list of executives. We had 2 more just recently. There are Business Insiders articles on each one of those. This last one was Rob, who has done quite a bit for him, and they seem to be leaving quite a bit. GCP, I don't know why GCP specifically. I don't know if it's because they're under a ton of pressure. Or whatnot. I will get to your question, Russell, about BPF door. The answer is no, and I don't know if it relates to this, but or to the tractors. Probably the tractors. We can talk about the tractors a little bit more. But I wanted to talk about if anybody else has noticed the exodus from GCP. I just been noticing it. I've seen articles every once in a while about another executive that left, and it seems to be a trend. Now, they weren't the only one that had this problem. Apple's director of machine learning, and I don't know if this is part of the same reason that GCPs are leaving, but basically Apple has a mandatory 3 days back at the office, and basically one of their directors had the guts to stand up and say, my team doesn't think that that's the best way to do it. So yeah, let me see the quote here. Many of us feel we have to choose between either a combination of our families, our well-being, and being empowered to do our best work, or being part of Apple. That's a pretty decisive attack on Apple there. And this, yeah. So anyways, Apple's director of machine learning has resigned from their role. So I see this happening, and I don't know if GCP's is the same, because GCP also has a mandatory return to work. I believe, I don't know exactly. I don't believe I know exactly what Okay, and Russell said someone said that teams in Apple aren't allowed to talk to one another about what they are working on. So they can't use hallway innovation as an excuse to bring people back to Apple's offices. If that's true, yeah, one, hallway innovation can be done remotely as well. I'm not perfect at it, but one of the things that I try to do is I have office hours. Sometimes those get trampled on by other meetings as I have taken on more responsibilities and done more stuff at my company, but I still try to have those office hours where we can sit and talk about whatever. It's kind of my pre-designated hallway time. I'll be there. If anybody shows up, great. If nobody shows up, fine. I'm going to just sit there and work on whatever. But I actually have some hallway time or water cooler time. So I think one of the problem people have with remote working is they don't actually understand. And I saw this with GCP's earlier statement where they were like, we hire young people and there's no way to train them up if they're not in the office. Well, that's hogwash. It just means that you haven't actually tried to mentor them online. You haven't tried to understand what that means and how it affects people. GCP hasn't tried to actually do it. They've just been looking for when they can come back. They haven't said, hey, this is what we're doing, and for right now, we're going to try our best to do the best that we can and, try to make it work. That's what they need to do. That's what they need to assume that, hey, we can't bring everyone to a single location. It doesn't even really make sense because you're trying to bring thousands upon thousands of people to the same place that doesn't even have any water left to share with any new residents. It's not the right thing to do. Anyways, I digress on that. The point is, you have to think about things differently when you're remote. Hallway innovation is a really good thing, but you can actually think about different ways to achieve the same thing. You know, when you're talking about like the Joule test and being able to talk about something in the hallway and things like that, I agree with those things, but you can actually do them a little bit differently, fully remote. And I'm not saying not to get the teams together. I highly think that you should get each micro team, microservice, or however you split up your teams together at least twice a year. That face-to-face time when you can go out and get drinks or go out and get lunch is invaluable. It puts a real person behind the camera. And despite what everybody says, cameras and video conferencing is really the height equalizer, because guess what? You never know how tall somebody is until you meet them in real life. That's just one thing I'm going to have to say. All right, yes. Anyways, I digress. Sorry, you guys got me on a little... I feel like no one tried, or not many people tried to do remote working correctly. And when you look at remote working, you just have to think about it differently. It's also why, like, I really like, now I'm forgetting his name. I want to say his name is David Flanagan, but it's not. Farley. I really like his stuff, but I think that he's really stuck on a co-located development team. So he'll talk about trunk-based development being far superior to something like a PR, something like you see in an open source. And I think that Dave Farley is missing the point with when one is better than the other. To him, trunk-based is always better. It's not about what's best for your team. It's not saying, and so I get that this is what I see with Apple as well. And this is not me hating on Dave Farley. I actually would love it if he would recognize who I was and have a conversation with me, because I think he's a reasonable person. But I think that this is what Apple is doing, is they see a way of doing it. This is the way. And there's no other way that is as good as this way. And it might work for some teams. It might be the best way for some teams or for some ways of working. And it might just not be the best way for lots of teams. Anyways, let's move on to the rest of the news so that we can at least cover some other stuff other than remote working. I need to do like a video on it. I really have been trying to reach out to people like Dave Farley because I think that maybe I could help broaden their horizon with thinking about development teams a little bit differently. Yeah, I agree, Rubber Cable. I agree. The absolute statement feels dogmatic, and especially when, okay, you guys got me. No, I guess I got myself on the remote working, but I baited myself. But when you're talking about large companies, the whole point of microservices, and I have a video on microservices, the whole point of microservices is to allow individual teams to kind of self-manage. Managing small teams is easy, large teams very hard. And it's about breaking your company into small teams that are easy to manage. And it also means that those small teams can manage themselves in a way that makes sense to those small teams. I would have no problems if a small team, or even at the director level, said that we're doing 3 days at the office. I wouldn't have a problem if that same director said, well, we're doing full remote. I think that this is what a team in their management style needs to understand and go with. And you know what? Different management styles are going to be better at, there's going to be managers that aren't good at remote management. It's a different way of thinking. So you can't even hire the same people that are good at managing teams internally that manage teams remotely. They take a different set of stuff. So anyways, no, I'm not saying that you can't change. You can't. Absolutely. If you're a good people manager, you can do it remote or not. You just have to think a little bit differently when you're managing people remotely. You don't have these times when you just happen to be in the hallway. You have to actually purposefully do those things. And I hate these freaking cats. They are so loud. I would have no cats if it wasn't for my children and my wife. All right. Moving on to the rest of the news because I have to get done with this. Let's move on. All right, these are, yep. All right. This is, one second. Bad order. All right. This is, quickly going back to the security, every ISP in the US has been ordered to block these 3 pirate streaming services. Yeah, this seems a little dramatic, but whatever, we're moving on. Code Notary, this is part of my cloud about Kubernetes. Code Notary launches, did not mean to click on that, full stack monitoring solution for Kubernetes and VMware environments. This is pretty cool. It looks Grafana based. You can tell Grafana dashboards, but it's actually a monitoring stack that collects stuff for you, not just their dashboards. So pretty cool. If you know some of the other stuff that Code Notary has done, definitely worth checking out on. Now, something that my community saw, I believe Russell pointed out, you notice that I covered the CNCF being in pretty hot water about their face coverings for their KubeCon. And they kind of did a post-mortem. And I took their post-mortem for face value because when people do post-mortems, I tend to trust them. Maybe this isn't my bad. Maybe I shouldn't trust these people. But when you come out and say, my bad, I made a mistake, I'm not inherently looking at it to see that you're maybe making yourself look better than you actually are in your post-mortem. And somebody in my community started pointing out to me that maybe I should look into this just a little bit better. And so I started to. Now, I couldn't reach any Spanish lawyers. So I have no legal advice on this. This is not anything that I did, but I did read a bunch of English, Spanish news websites. And so the best that I can tell, they lied a little. Now, maybe they have a contract that they signed that says that they can't. And if that's the case, that would be an interesting point. But I haven't seen any of the CNCF's contracts. So there's definitely things there. The CNCF did this, and I put out my feelers on Twitter all 6 of you guys didn't respond to me. There are over 50 vendors that they need to check in with. They state, it is illegal for us to require any local staff working the event to wear masks. Now, I took this for face value. I don't know Spanish law. There are more authoritarian, there are different ways of looking at things. I don't know Spanish law. I don't know European laws that well. And so I didn't know if one of their like worker safety things was like, unless if you're in the medical field, you can't require a mask. I didn't know. In the US, it would be very weird. You know, if you said that you had to dress up as a clown outfit, it was your choice to either dress up in a clown outfit or not show up to work. Like that's your choice. So it would be weird for the US, but I took it for face value because I don't know Spanish law. And so it could be. I tried Googling. And this here is kind of the best that I found. And basically, as this news agency says, it is no longer mandatory. It will be up to employers to decide whether staff should continue to wear masks. But it's not mandatory. But this says that the employer can deem that you need to wear a mask. And there's other articles that I found. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Are they kind of lying in their postmortem? I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything that stated that you couldn't require people to wear masks if you wanted to. Anyways, I don't know. I feel bad. I don't really want to dig up drama. That's not really my thing. But this was interesting, and I didn't find a whole bunch of people covering this little caveat. You guys are fantastic for pointing it out. I brought it up last week, and I was just kind of like, yeah, they state that they can't legally require people to wear masks, so screw you guys. But no. I don't know. I couldn't find one news article that stated employers couldn't actually require masks. So let me know if you guys know anything. If you guys know a Spanish lawyer who would be willing to talk to me, and I'll pay them a quarter of their rate for an hour. I don't know how much an hour costs. I might not be able to afford that either. But anyways, yeah, let me know what you think. Let's move on. Let's move into AWS. We actually don't have a whole lot of cloud news. MKS or MSK is now generally available. If you guys don't know what MSK is, I don't know if I did this last week or not, or talk about it, but it's basically the Kafka. It's managed service for Kafka. Yeah, it really hasn't been a great couple of weeks month for the CNCF. Not really. I think I could have stated that. I saw a lot of their community is very aggressive. Aggressively nice is what I'm going to state it as. And you know what? The CNCF have a hard problem. Really, the CNCF is there to make sure that no company gets a controlling interest. But really, what they found themselves in is basically protecting corporate interests versus community interests. And there's kind of these two warring clans that are butting heads. You know, I would guess that a lot of pushback from the corporations was to not require masks because that is more inclusive, or to the corporation's eyes, because being forced to wear masks when they're not required actually discourages people. So inclusion is this fallacy loop that people have, because to be inclusive, you have to exclude people and things like that. And so anyways, the mask thing is I feel bad for them, because there's probably no winning other than coming out and saying this is a hard topic and we can't be right. Because I think that's what the CNCF has actually been relegated to deal with. Here's your corporate interests. Here's your I almost said civilian interests, but your community interests, and try to make everybody play nice. And it's like making a bunch of 5-year-olds play nice. If you've ever tried to do it, there's a reason I didn't go into daycare. Making 5-year-olds play nice is difficult. So I don't underestimate the work they have to do. It's difficult, but I see problems in the community and in how things are structured. We can talk about it. I like the community as a whole, and this is why I don't talk about it, because I don't feel, you'll get ostracized because you say that you see problems, and people are like, "Oh, this is the greatest community," and yet you're doing it because you actually want to see it flourish in the future. And so, yeah, whatever. Anyways, let's move on with our cloud news. MSK is different from Kinesis. MKS, I don't know why I say MKS. I very much like MKS. This is managed Kafka. And basically you just pay for whatever you stream, the data you stream. This is different than Kinesis, which is their own thing, and it's now in general availability. GCP had something actually worthwhile in their what's new. The Anthos, again, Anthos is their cross-platform GKE clusters, had a pretty big update that allows it to run newer versions on AWS and Azure. It also now adds Windows as your node pool. So, Kubernetes actually supports running Windows containers as well, which I don't even understand what Windows container is. I need to investigate it and make a video of it for my own learning. I don't know why you would want to do. I guess I do know why. You're managing everything on Kubernetes. You have some derelict Windows services that you just like to manage the same. I get why. It still hurts my feelings, though, that people do that. So anyways, this is pretty big deal because now you can run Windows workloads in your Anthos clusters. Prior to this, you could not. So pretty big deal for anybody that's looking to do that, looking to manage all of their entire stack, including their Windows things, in one stack. So yeah, that's actually a pretty big deal, I think, especially if you're an Anthos user. Now, I have not actually met anybody that uses Anthos in the wild. I know people that use GCP in the wild, never met an Anthos user in the wild. So I know that they're investing a ton into Anthos. If you do use Anthos, leave me a comment. If you know somebody that does, or know of a company that leverages it, and leverages it well. I don't mean just like they use Anthos, but like actually leverage it to do like a real multi-cloud distributed architecture. Like, I want to know that use case. I want to see that blog article because I haven't looked for it, but I haven't seen it either. And I see quite a few blog articles on things like that. This is just talking about the Anthos multi-cloud, where you can create Kubernetes cluster in both AWS and Azure cloud environments. And this is basically creating a GCP Kubernetes cluster in AWS and Azure. And this is actually a pretty good. They have different things on Anthos. So this multi-cloud API reference is fairly good, and you can dig into their Anthos. So I'll leave a link to this. Their Anthos documentation and kind of how they did it. They don't get too technical, but it's pretty good. Let's talk Cloudflare for just a little bit. I don't cover DigitalOcean and Cloudflare every single time because they just don't release stuff quite as often as the big ones. But I do try to every once in a while go over the things that they are. So I do believe I did cover that Cloudflare and their API gateway. So that is good. So I'm not going to cover too much because I'm pretty sure I already brought that up last week. But they did bring the end of the road for Cloudflare CAPTCHAs. I know that everybody likes cloud CAPTCHAs. But here's a blog post on how they got rid of. This is what I love about Cloudflare in general, is not only do they do cool things, but then they release a blog on how they did the cool thing. It's a fantastic way to run a company. I absolutely would love to interview their CEO. Hasn't responded to my emails, but yeah, I do really, really, really like them. So this is just an article on it. I think that this is actually also my engineering blog post of the week. It went over a lot of the different things and all the metrics that they tried to test and how easy they were to get around, how good they were, what they used to define what was doing the job appropriately. And so yeah, this is yeah. Yeah. Anyways, really cool. Love Cloudflare. They're getting rid of CAPTCHAs, which I like. They also let wow, English just kind of escaped me here. All right. So they made it easier to use tunnels into Cloudflare. So this is just making it easier to use what you already use. And that is it. Azure didn't actually have any cloud news. So there's ridiculous easy tunnels. Basically, it's just allowing you to create these tunnels much faster with their zero trust, like always. I don't know if there's much more to say. If you know what tunnels are, they made them easier to use. If you don't know what they are, then I mean, it's like a VPN. I say like. I don't actually think it uses VPN, but it's their zero trust. And yeah. All right, next we have a game. This is to the general news. And you have a problem with bots. Everybody has a problem with bots. That's just the state of the world. But some people have a much bigger problem with bots. And then there's ways to handle problems. There's ways to say, well, there's Band-Aids, and then there's this. This actually isn't even a Band-Aid. This is like you put mud on the wound to pretend that the wound doesn't exist. That's the problem. This actually, I think, made the problem worse and just made people upset. So, this person, I noticed this because, hey, they used Cloudflare DNS, which shouldn't actually be a problem. My guess is that they were actually using like a Cloudflare tunnel or VPN, and disabling their VPN DNS combo is what fixed it. But there's other people that actually had problems with DNS. Anyways, but then I was like, why are people having this problem with logging in to Lost Ark? I don't even know what Lost Ark is. I don't play it. And I started digging into it. And it turns out that they started preventing people from using VPNs. And I was like, why did the game care that they were using a VPN? If you pay for our service, why not? And their statement is that we have a problem with bots. Technically, Amazon Games Terms of Service, I guess Lost Ark is part of Amazon Games Terms of Service, which states that you can't use anything to mask. You can't use anything to mask. One second. You may not use any technology or technique to obscure or disguise your location. What? So I'm guessing this is for like geo-locking content or something in a game, which still seems completely ridiculous to me and asinine and stupid. But there's so many things other than VPN to hide your location. this is like one of the dumbest things ever. And so they used this thing to ban VPNs because they were saying that VPN is a way to hide your location, even though you could use a VPN located right beside you, which a lot of people do because that's the fastest. You want the closest VPN. So you'll use the one in the same city as you. So it's not actually necessarily hiding your location either. Anyways, they ban these bots, or they ban VPNs to fix their bot issue, which doesn't fix their bot issues because the bots don't actually use VPNs. So I don't know. This is like, you made it worse for your users who use VPNs, and you didn't fix the problem. I think it's just putting mud right in that wound. You cover it up, no problem. And then they started deleting this stuff. So I actually read this. We know some of you guys need VPNs to play, but we can't fix our bot issue, so we're banning all VPNs because some bots use them. That's basically what the post said too. And that's basically generally the general consensus. There were a few bots that used VPNs. Other ones don't actually use VPNs at all, and it doesn't help them at all. So anyways, very interesting stuff. Hope you don't play Lost Ark. It's hard. You know what? I'm pointing fingers at Lost Ark. Don't get me wrong. They're probably not experts on that. And it's a hard problem. And you know what? Don't give them too much grief. Honestly, there's things we can learn from, and we all do stupid stuff because we have a knee-jerk reaction. We have servers that are burning down because of bots, and we're like, hey, look, we see some are using VPNs. We have this clause in our terms of service that makes it technically okay. Let's ban VPNs. And this at least lets our servers not be burning down right now. Okay. I get it. It's still putting mud in your wound, but I understand that solving the bot problem is hard. And so, you know what? Anytime I cover these, I want you guys to remember I'm not actually hating on the specific developers or stuff. You have timelines that you have to meet. If you told me I had a bot problem and I needed to fix it tomorrow, or this week, well then I'm going to do something stupid as well. And it might alleviate some of the pain, but it's not going to be a real fix. And that's just the game that we play. So anyways, I'll point fingers, but really take this as a learning experience and be thinking about your bot mitigation plans. Actually, that's probably something that we don't think about enough. Bot mitigation plans. We need a bot mitigation service. That should be a Cloudflare. Actually, Cloudflare might actually offer that service now that I think about it, but that should be a service. Bot mitigation as a service. BMAS? BMAS, next biggest thing. All right. Let's talk about GitHub Actions. Actually, this was going to be my engineering blog of the week. Doesn't hit it now, but it's actually a pretty good read if you use GitHub Actions. I highly recommend it. It's about sharding your GitHub Actions to make them run faster. Now, it doesn't actually run faster as in uses less GitHub Action running minutes. So if you're running a lot of GitHub Actions, you might still want to run that local worker. But it gives you feedback on your pull requests a whole lot faster. Instead of waiting 2 hours, you can get it done in 30 minutes. So basically, this is just sharding it up. It goes through the steps that they did. It was a really good article. Thank you for whoever wrote this. Let's find their name. Should be up here at the top. Fantix King. Thank you. Good article. So just breaking up your workflows and sharding them and making them run a whole lot faster. Yeah, I think that they went from 2 hours to like 20 minutes or something. And getting that feedback, fast feedback is so important. Making it so that you can make a pull request and see how it is working is so useful. All right, so Kubernetes, actually this was supposed to be in the cloud news, my bad, is adopting SigStore for protecting their open source supply chain, or there's a lot to protecting your open source supply chain, and SigStore can be a part of this. So this is basically validating who you got it from. If you ever use something like GPG, which I use GPG a lot, where I can encrypt something with your public key and only you can decrypt it. I can also encrypt it with my private or with my key, and you can actually know that it was signed by me, so that you not only know who you received it from, but I know that you're the only person that can decrypt it. SigStore kind of brings this to the ecosystem where it allows you to sign your stuff. It allows you to sign your container images, your artifacts, so that people know they're getting it from you. This is really good. You not only does it allow you, So not only does it allow you to know that you're getting it from you, so it allows you to make this secure pipeline. Now, that's only the start of a secure pipeline. And as you're going to see in our projects back here, where we talk about some of our projects, there's a whole lot about knowing what goes into your pipeline. So just because you know who you got it from, what did you build it with? What open source projects do they use? And have there been any vulnerabilities against them? And who are contributing code to those open source projects? It's a big deal, and there's a lot of stuff that's going into it. Not an easy problem to solve either. But we'll see some open source projects that help us in those areas in just a little bit. All right, GitHub will require all code contributors to use two-factor authentication. This is a way that GitHub is trying to boost security of the supply chain. So you can go read the blog post here. Software security starts with developers securing developer accounts with two-factor authentication. GitHub will require all users who contribute code on GitHub to enable one or more forms of two-factor authentication by the end of 2023. So you have time. You have time. But it's meaning that platform-wide, you're going to have to use two-factor authentication to validate who you are. And this is actually protecting supply chain. You notice they state it. The supply chain starts with the developer. And, you know, let's say I write an open source project that you really like and you trust me. You probably shouldn't, but you trust me. Let's say that you use that and it's some Go mod that you use. Well, the thing is, if my account isn't secure and somebody hacks that, then now all of a sudden your code isn't secure either. As long as they don't change the API and they make an update to it, they could actually add a vulnerability to everybody's software that uses my software. This is the big security nightmare that is involved in this. So yeah, making everybody use two-factor authentication for open source projects, I think is valid. And any open source project that's a real open source project should require two-factor authentication for any contributors. And if they don't, you probably shouldn't use. Now, there's problems with two-factor authentication. I know. It's not perfect. It's not a silver bullet, but it's the best we can do right now. So you should be using it. Let's move on. Delta, a highly available storage, a highly available, strongly consistent storage service using chain replication. Now, all of you saying blockchain right now, you stop it. Stop it. That's not what they said. They didn't say blockchain. They said using chain replication. Completely different-ish. Completely different-ish. It actually has some of the same principles, but it's not blockchain. So, this is engineering at Meta. Okay, you know what? I understand that every large company, Apple did this with Alphabet, and I think Alphabet is a stupid name. I think Meta is a stupid name. I know that they all do this, where they are trying to be a company outside of their big main product. You know, Google's trying to be a company that's not just Google. Meta and Alphabet are just stupid names. I just really can't get over it. Anyways, this is a good read. I've been bit by a little bit of how we store data and how we make it highly available and still fast reads. Interesting subject. And this uses a different, we're probably all familiar with things like Raft, which is used by etcd to provide our strongly consistent data on Kubernetes. And this takes a different approach, which is really cool. It doesn't use Raft, but it still provides highly consistent storage. And you're like, what? Not a consensus algorithm? Highly strongly consistent storage? This is why you should read it, because there's always two different ways to solve something. And the cool thing is this isn't a competitor to etcd. And as you go through it and see, you'll see that it's more of a cold storage. It's more of something you put in that you want to kind of, it's not archival. It's not over there in archival, but it's definitely not in the hot either. So it's not competing with etcd. It's doing its own thing and doing it well. That's what you should look for when you're using something. And so Delta's goal was to be stupid simple and strongly consistent. And so it gives you this, basically, I can't screw up storage that is also highly strongly consistent. So it's dependable and simple. So it's actually pretty cool. And it uses this chain replication, which, again, actually borrows stuff from blockchain. It's not what you think of as blockchain, but it borrows some of the same concepts. I say some. Anyways, definitely worth a read, especially if you know what quorum replication is. Again, think etcd versus chain replication. I love thinking about different ways of doing the same thing and how those different ways, again, this would never be an etcd. Kubernetes would never base their things off of this. But it's definitely an interesting concept to look at. So, I highly recommend looking at it. It's really cool. And it's a good article. Well done article. I would expect nothing else from a very large team that has the resources to actually put time into really good articles. Anyways, good article. Check it out. Oh, yes. I need to start a Rust section. I do like Rust. We've started using Rust in QuizKit for better performance. Basically, I thought that this was, again, another contender for engineering blog of the week. If you're looking at Rust and wanting to understand why you might use it sometimes, I think that this is really good. And even me, being a pretty big fan of Rust, don't think that it's useful for everything. But it goes into the impact on users. It goes on to performance benefits and how they measured some of this stuff. I think they could have done a little bit better of a job on basically measuring some of this stuff. But it was definitely a measurable increase. They did a pretty good job. I love that they gave code examples, because sometimes, especially if you're new to Rust, taking what they say from like a Python and converting it into a Rust is definitely difficult. One second. They have, maybe it's a Rust repository. I think it's a Rust repository. Okay, yeah. So you can go and see, but they call out their Python in here and how they changed it. It's very very nice to see that. So nice job on that. All right, I have a question. There's microservices. We're not talking about microservices. We're talking about multi-repositories or mono-repositories. I have always argued against mono-repositories. Do a lot of people do this? I feel like there's absolutely no real reason. And the only thing that mono repositories do is it makes everything easily depend on everybody. So in my monolith video, I see this so many times when like they have these shared dependencies, complicated dependency graphs. You cannot independently release any of your services because they all depend on each other, so they have to all be deployed at the same time. And I feel like this is a mono repo specific thing. When you have them broken out into separate repos, you actually force yourself not to have this problem because it will be a problem and you'll know it. And then in the end, you're just making all this extra tooling to support using Git in a way that's going to make you do bad things anyways. Why do the mono? I would love it if somebody gave me a good argument on why to do a mono repo in the first place. But if you do, if mono repos are your jam, Codespaces now supports them better. Russell, you have just come up with the greatest thing. So I'm going to be done ranting about Codespaces because I don't have enough time to talk about how much I hate mono repos. But Russell said, wouldn't it be great if Copilot could take your code in language X and replicate the functionality in language Y? That is a fantastic. I'm going to make an issue on GitHub for it because I think that's really a fantastic learning tool. Like, hey, I know how to do this in language X or Y, and I'd like to learn to do it in language X or Y. That is a really good idea. That's a fantastic idea. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. All right, so let's get on to our open source projects. And as I alluded to, I actually have two groups. One is just, maybe we won't even talk about those, so I can talk about them next week. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about one group, which unfortunately doesn't have a whole lot of tools. It's actually one of the things that I see as a problem in the open source community. There's actually a lot of paid products that are actually really good, and I'll show you some of those. But there's not actually a lot of good open source projects, and the problem probably is that it's probably difficult. Oh, so rubber cable, and just for everybody, I think monolithic apps are better performance. When everybody talks about scaling, and when they talk about scaling out, in theory, generally, they're not talking about necessarily better performance. Also, again, watch my microlith video. I don't actually think that you can't scale monoliths. As long as you don't store state in monoliths, you can. You just can't scale them at the same level. That's all. That's all that it's talking about. You can't scale them at the same minute level. And really, that doesn't matter a whole lot of times. I actually think most people should start with a well-designed monolith and only break it up when they hit really big scale. I'm talking really big scale. I think that microservices are too much of like, if you don't say, hey, we start with a microservice, you'll not pass your coding interview or your architecture interview. But I actually think that's a failing on our interviewers. Anyways, if you have a monolith, it's not a multi-mono repo though. That's the thing. The mono repos are just, anyways. Ugh, I hate mono repos. The mono repo is when you have multiple applications in the same repo. So you have all your microservices in the same repo. It's when you have, or like Google. But Google makes all of this tooling to solve the problem. But my problem is, why did you make the tooling to solve a problem you forced on yourself? You made your own problem and you had to make tools to solve your problem. Stop making tools to solve a problem that you can fix by not making the problem. That's my problem. All right. I'm moving on because I have to get going here soon. Solving the world's open source software security problems is the headline of this article. All right, so basically what this goes into, this article, is basically your code can only be as secure as the code that you use in another open source project. And understanding the security implications of those projects and the trust in those projects is difficult as well. And it's hard. Oh my. We missed this before talking about this. We'll talk about that next week. We'll push that one off. It's not a big deal. So, oh no. Oh, what? Oh, man. Okay, we do have to talk about this because this was supposed to be in my Rust. And I screwed up the ordering. I'm sorry. I have to admit, I was out for my brother's wedding, so I didn't get as much time yesterday to prepare. My apologies. We do have a little bit more Rust. Like I said, I need to start a Rust section. Replace Linux mutex and Convar with Futex based ones. So this was really cool. It was a fun read for me because I learned a lot about locking in the language itself. And so yeah, this was really cool for me. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from people that post this. So thank you. Mouse is what I'm gonna call you. But yeah, this is actually really awesome. And this is about updating STD, the standard library for Rust, and just the different ways to do it. And yeah, so anyways, cool discussion. You should read the whole discussion that goes on here. There's actually quite a bit that you can look into. You can look at the changes, which that one wasn't interesting, but yeah, definitely check it out. The other thing that I saw here was this eGUI. eGUI is a Rust GUI, pure Rust GUI that is supposed to be kind of a universal GUI. I don't know. Looked fun. Now let's get back into our supply chain because I was all prepared to talk about supply chain and how it's hard, and that's what we're talking about. They call it an SBOM. An SBOM is a software bill of materials. It's like if you were building a house except for software. A bill of materials is a pretty common thing, and it's about building one of these for your open source software that you use. The first step is understanding which packages you use, because I probably guarantee you use more than you think if you're not already keeping it. Now, these people have a solution. Sneak, that's what I call them at least. I go back and forth. Sneak has a solution that as well. These are all, so Sneak Advisor has a solution. These are all paid for solutions, but there's not a whole lot of open source solutions. Now, in my not very vast knowledge on this, so in companies I've always used a paid solution. There's actually a decent number of them. If you're on GitHub, you know, there is actually, for open source projects, I believe it's completely free. They do dependency graphs for you, and if you're a private repository, they actually have if it's a private repository, they actually have, you can pay for it. So there's that. But as far as open source solutions, the only ones that I could find, and again, I haven't used open source ones, was this KubeClarity and this BOM on Kubernetes SIG, which is basically the bill of materials, but this is kind of a Kubernetes-ish only one. So is this one, to be fair. So these try to find that bill of materials that you're using, all those software projects that you're using, and compile them into a list so that you can know what you're using. And this actually goes more than just security. This also goes to legal aspects like licensing, making sure that you're only using licenses that you're allowed to use. Because not all open source licenses are really open source. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. You should definitely check it out. Another thing you can do with a software bill of materials is look for things that are security vulnerabilities. So this isn't just about trusting the software developers that created it. It's also about saying, well, are there any known vulnerabilities? And if they are, I need to know about them. So you need to have an SBOM, and you need to have it yesterday. And yeah. My other ones, I'm saving for next week. That's it. All right, so Rubber Cable said IAPC comms versus REST RPC for trading apps, so repos don't have to be separated so much. Yeah, there's definitely, again, everything is, when somebody says there's one way to do it, period, they usually don't understand that different apps solve different problems. And a lot of times there can be different communication standards, there can be different things that and different reasons to pick a different technology. 6 years ago, I wasn't popular when I said that maybe this was like 7 years ago, RPC I thought made more sense in data centers and in apps to apps communication, backend applications, and that giving up and just doing all REST inside your own application didn't really make sense. It seemed like a front end communication thing. But now people are starting to come back with a little bit more clarity on that. So it really depends on what you're doing. Never take my advice or anybody else's advice and take it as the golden rule that you have to follow. You take what I say and you take what other people say and you learn from it, and you try to understand your problem specifically and how it relates to your problem. It might not relate to your problem. It might relate to your problem. Anyways, thanks for everybody for your time. Hopefully, later this week, you'll see some clips of this video on my new one. Obviously, they won't be released as soon as they will be next week. Hopefully, I'm going to be releasing a few towards the beginning of the week. But I'll tweet it out when it's coming out. Thanks for everybody's feedback. Keep giving me feedback. I made this a little bit longer so that I can make clips out of it, but maybe you don't like that. And if that's the case, that's fine. I've let myself expand on my ideas and my own personal feelings on some of these things that I didn't generally do previously. If you don't like that, that's fine. I'll cut that out. My thought was that I can do the clips so that you guys don't have to so I can give those for those people that would like them, and I can clip out like the cloud news section specifically for people that just want that. Anyways, I want to thank you all for your support, your continued support. I love all of you. You guys are awesome. All right. I will see you guys next week. I hope that you guys have